Hello ukulele bandits. So this is going to be the first video in a series that I'm making for you called Theory for Ukulele. The basic idea is that we're going to talk about fundamental music theory and relating it to your instrument, the ukulele. Normally you would learn these things on piano and guitar when you're starting out or as you're learning, but ukulele, most of the time we learn chords and songs quite early on, and we skip a lot of this knowledge. So you should find it quite useful and fill in a few holes in your playing if you've been playing a little while. And if you're just starting out, hopefully some of this should be quite useful. It may be a little bit intense and you may need to sort of sit back a little bit and come back to it later, or watch the video a few times, which is the reason for making these videos in the first place. But we are going to be talking about notes, pitches, scales, chords and keys, all those sort of things that we hear about, but you might not necessarily know what they mean or how to use them. So we are going to learn about them, understand them, and I'll be giving you some really useful exercises and tips. So hopefully you enjoy, and if you do, smash the like and obviously come back for more, and we get on with today's. Right, you've got to bear with me because we're going to go a little bit sciencey to start with, and just want to explain pitches and notes. So to start off with that, it is a little bit sciencey, and the whole idea is if we were to stretch a string, and depending on how thin or thick that string was, how tight it was, and the distance we were pulling it, it would vibrate once we plucked it at a certain speed, and that is called a frequency of which that vibration occurs at. So it could be a fast vibration or a slow vibration. Now depending on that thickness or that distance of string, the frequency would either be a fast frequency or a slow frequency, or if you like, a high frequency and a low frequency. So the vibrations would be faster or slower. So if I was to take my bass ukulele and give you an example, the string from here to here obviously, and it's pinned down here and it's pinned down here, and then when I pluck it, it vibrates. And because this is the distance of the string, this is the thickness of the string, and this is how taut it is, it creates that frequency, that note, or what we'd like to say, that pitch. Would be better really to say pitch. So the pitch is whether it's high or low. And if I was to do this with a normal ukulele, well, this is a slightly bigger version, so that you can see the distance of the string is very, very similar, but the string is a lot tighter and it's thinner. So if I was to pluck that, you can hear that's a lot higher. That note is a higher pitch. So in terms of pitch, it's higher. So we go high and we go low. So we're going to go high here, and then we got low here. So that's basics of pitch. Pitch is the frequency of which they vibrate at, and depending on the thickness and the distance, etc., will create a higher or a lower pitch. Now notes are basically the names given to a set frequency, a set pitch. And in music we have 12 notes in modern Western music that if you look at standard notation and music that you're familiar to, it will be 12 notes. This has been formulated over hundreds of years. So if you go back about 400 years or so, that's when they first started using the whole range of 12 notes. So if we were to look at our diagram, we can talk about the 12 notes in music now, but a question that does come up is why 12 notes? Why is there 12 notes in music? So that question first. So if we stretch that string, and we know that we can pluck it and it creates a frequency which is measured in hertz, and in music we give it a pitch name, if you like. So for example, we will say the pitch is A or B or C, and that's technically what we call a note. A note is the name of a pitch. So if we were to stretch it and we were to cut that in half, and then cut that in half, and then that one in half, and we kept halving it, when we get to 12 we've got quite an even space between each of those notes. Up until that point there's some unevenness between them, but when we get to 12 it is quite even. So that's a really nice number as well, 12 notes to play with, to make music out of. Because if you think about it, if you get your voice and you try and hum a note and then take it up higher in pitch. If I go you can hear it smoothly go up and down through different frequencies. But on a musical instrument, it doesn't do that. It steps. It goes up in steps. It doesn't smoothly go up. So it's quite hard to learn to sing, because there's all those other frequencies we can hit, and hitting those exact 12 notes. So if you're learning to sing with the ukulele, learning to sing the scales that we learn is a really good way of training your voice to be able to sing pitches and notes. So that's why we've got 12 notes, because if we chop it up into 12, we get that nice evenly spaced. We could carry on chopping up, like I said, if you got that smoothness of that note going, there's lots of other frequencies in between those notes. And if you were to tune it, I'll give you another example with the ukulele. If you were to take a note and then tune it, that's what your voice is doing. You can hear it gradually go up through other frequencies and back down again. And when we tune it, getting it to one note to another, we have to move it a certain distance to reach that pitch. So these 12 notes are a good even number. If we were to carry on, it would go up into the hundreds. If you were to take every frequency that's possible, it would literally be hundreds. And trying to play an instrument with hundreds of notes, well, it would be, not only would it be impossible, but also if you think about it, your ear, when you're listening to one note to the next note, and this is another example I guess I can give you. So if I'm going from, so I'm on my A string, and if I was to play the A sharp and then play the B, you can hear those notes are quite close to each other. It's not, you can distinguish there's a pitch there, because it does jump in the frequency, if you like, the pitch. But if I was to go there, it's very obvious to our ears that one's lower and one's higher. Well, if you can imagine, if we had hundreds of notes and they're all very, very close to each other, you probably wouldn't hear the difference between one note and the next note very easily, and it would sound very strange musically and very dissonant, where all those notes would kind of clash each other. So I would suggest having a break, having a cup of tea, and then we'll go to the next bit. Okay, so you've had your break, I've had mine, and now we're at the diagram, and we're going to learn the chromatic scale on the ukulele. But before I go a little bit further, I'm going to have to explain a couple of things, and this is why these notes. Why is it not A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, etc.? So it's a good reason for it, but it goes back hundreds of years, more of a history lesson. And the principle of music, even though there was that 12 even sounds, when the first notation of music came into effect, when they first started writing down, which looked very different to this notation, there was a lot more lines, and it was definitely used for singing and not instrumentation at the time. So instruments really are something that came in a lot later, and especially the piano it's quite a modern instrument, the piano, and it changed. Notation had to change a lot to fit in with these modern instruments, the techniques and the things that you could do on these instruments. So for voice, when you were singing, it was mainly religious hymns and chants, and certain notes would be used and certain notes wouldn't be used. And the C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, if you like, if we want to call it this, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so the first up to A to G in the alphabet were the only notes that were used to start with. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, they were the only notes that used to start with, that were always notated. And there wasn't these things like keys and scales and systems like that. It was very, very basic. It was just literally someone would hum a note and they would write it down. And certain pitches, so for example, I'll take the piano and show you as an example. So if I got that note and then I was to play that note, if they're put together, they sound not very pleasant. They sound quite dissonant. And obviously, very early music, it was about making it sound melodic. So these, what we call half tones or semitones that are in between, were not used. So we only ever used A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. You can hear that that sounds very musical. So if I was to use these ones in between, doesn't sound so musical. Well, to our modern ears, we kind of used to hearing them a bit more, so it isn't so bad. But back then, very early on, it'd be, oh, that's sinful, and it would be frowned upon using notes that sounded disgusting, and yeah, there'd be a lot of religious words being spouted about being the devil's notes and things like that. So and that was a long time ago. And then when instruments came involved and people started using those notes, they had to give them a name. And so the note that was the pitch or note that was played in between the A and the B was called A sharp. And some of these notes you'll notice have a sharp and some don't, and it's just because of their distance between each other. So there's a good reason why we have A, B, C, D, F, G, and then in between we have these sharp notes, and they're like what are half tones, those notes that are just in between those two natural notes, if you like, A and B. And we're starting it from C, so we're going C, C sharp, D. Well, why are we starting it there? And it's literally just because the instrument that we're playing, as you all know, is tuned in such a way where C is the most prevalent key, which I will explain this in another video when I talk about chords and keys. I'll be explaining a bit more about that. But for now, we know that we use C, F, G, A minor. These are things that you probably know already. And so therefore, that key of C, if you like, is our starting note. And on the piano, it's a really good starting point. So if we look at the piano here, middle C, there's middle C on the piano. Now if I was to look at C on the ukulele, it's C is on the third string, the C string. That's the same note, it's middle C, so I can actually, you can hear me, I can play them at the same time even. I can't play a tune at the same time on both, that would be pretty tricky. I'll work on that, someone's probably mastered that though. So the idea is that if we learn it starting on C, it's more musical, so that you're learning the chromatic scale in a more musical way as opposed to just the alphabet. But the good thing is that once you've mastered the chromatic scale, in other words the 12 notes and the 12 notes names, you can then apply it from any starting point. You can apply it on the A string, the E string and the G string, and we are going to do that, and I'm going to show you something mega useful that you can already implement it and impress all your mates with, hopefully. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the chromatic scale starting from C on the ukulele, and we've already started. We know that middle C is this third string, that's the C string. So where do we go from there? So we're going to go to the next fret, and I want you to use the same finger as the fret. So C is open, first finger is on the first fret on that C string. And if you look at the bottom, so the top bit is all the note names and what it looks like on notation, but the bottom bit where it says third string, this is the order. We're going to go third string, open C, and then on the first fret we're going to play our C sharp here, and you can see there's a spacing issue here. Look, so you've got C sharp, first fret C sharp, and then the second fret D, and the third fret D sharp. So on this C string you're going to go C, C sharp, D, D sharp, C, C sharp, D, D sharp. So that's your chromatic scale, or the 12 musical notes starting on C, not A, because it's more musical and it will work better for you on the instrument that you're playing. C, C sharp, D, D sharp on that third string. Now if we go to the second string, that's an open E. That gives our next note after D sharp. You can see it above, it goes D sharp, then it goes to E. So we're going to go E, and then on the first fret we're going to go F, then F sharp, then G, then G sharp. So E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and I'm using all four fingers there. So I'm literally just playing open, 1, 2, 3, 4. So on the C string it was 1, 2, 3. And then it was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So already we've made it quite a way, and we've made it up to G sharp. And then on the final leg is on the first string, open A, A sharp, B, C. So we've now played through all 12 notes. A sharp, B and C on the first string. So I'll go through it one more time. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, next string, second string open, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, open on the A string at the bottom, A sharp, B, C. And that's the chromatic scale. There you go. So that is the chromatic scale, or C chromatic scale. It would be its technical name because you're starting on C and finish on C. But like I said, we're only doing it on that because it's more musical, more useful because of the way the instrument's tuned and pitched. And that relates really well to the piano as well, as you saw me play it earlier. Okay, so we've now learned how to play the 12 notes in music, or the chromatic scale. We've done it from C to C on the ukulele, and it's written out there in a musical score. And if you don't get that, just remember the pattern and use the diagram below to focus and remember it. And obviously try and remember the notes, the note names. Now, a nice way of remembering the chromatic scale, and this is a little trick, is if we were to go C and then go C sharp, we've got a sharp, and then go D, then we go D sharp, then E, then we don't have a sharp, and then you'll notice we've got a sharp after that, after the F, and then after the G, after the A, but we don't have one after the B. So on the piano, I'm only showing you this because it's a bit more visual. Well, hey, so we've got the C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. You notice we've got no black note in between this one, E and F. So there's no sharp between E and F. F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, B and C, and there's no sharp between B and C. So those two notes, E and F, B and C, don't have a sharp, but the rest do. So if you know the alphabet, you go A, B, C, D, F, G. I know it goes up to G. Every note has a sharp after them, apart from B and apart from E. After E, it goes straight to an F. After B, it goes straight to C. So if you were to say your alphabet, A, B, C, D, F, G, and then put those sharps in between, it'd be A sharp, B, C. Because there's no sharp, then it's C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F. No sharp after the E, so it's straight to F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and back to A. So that's a really nice way of remembering the chromatic scale in your head. A to G, no sharp after E, no sharp after B. Now on the diagram you see it goes, especially the notation at the top, you see it goes here, you see it goes, when it goes down, we substitute those sharps for flats. That is exactly the same note, just because we're going down in pitch, we just call them flats because we're going lower than the note. So it can be a little bit confusing at first, but if we look at it again on the piano, because it's just a bit more visual than the ukulele, we've got a C, then a C sharp, and then a D. If I was to go backwards, it'd be a D, then a D flat, I'm going lower, then a C. That's all that means. So you can actually just say it all in sharps, just to get your head round the chromatic scale. And then when you're going down the scale, you can just substitute those sharps obviously for the flats later. So I would just learn it up first of all, just go up the scale, say it in sharps. You just got to get the right notes to start with. And then the next step is, well, how can I use this? What is this? Why do I need to know this? Why is this useful? Well, this is for me the best bit about the reason why you should learn the chromatic scale, because once you've learnt your first few chords, C, F, G, A minor, maybe you've learnt E minor and D minor, so you know a few more chords as well, and then you're playing a lot of songs that are in the key of C, and if you come across other songs that are written and they've got an odd chord like a G sharp or an F sharp or a B flat, for example, it can be really off-putting learning those songs, because all of a sudden you've got to get your diagram of chords and there'll be like 50 chords on a sheet and you've got to go through them. I've got to learn that, I've got to learn that. And once you've reached a level where you're quite competent on C, F, G, A minor and E minor, it can be a little bit off-putting. Then all of a sudden getting your fingers to do something that's really hard to put in amongst those other chords. But if you learn the chromatic scale, you don't have to necessarily look at your chord sheet and learn new shapes. You just need to know how to move up the shapes you've learned. So let me show you. So if I take a G chord, and this is the best bit. So you've got G chord, which you know a G chord. You've learnt a G chord. Now if you wanted to play a G sharp, you'd get your diagram out and you look at maybe 3 or 4 different shapes that say G sharp. Which one do I learn? How do I, how do I play it? Where do I play it? Where do I put fingers and all that? And you're thinking of this unique shape G sharp, but actually, just like notes, it just moves up and down. So if I've got a G and I move all those notes, and I'm going to not include the open string, I'm just including the ones that I'm fingering. So I'm just including the third, second and first. That's all I'm playing on this chord. I just move them all up one. I have a G sharp. So all I've got to do to play a G is that, and all I've got to do to play a G sharp is slide it along one. Really easy. You just take a chord that you already know and you move it up one. So you now know a G sharp. So you can throw that into your chord repertoire. And if I move that up one more, if you look at the chromatic scale on the diagram, after G sharp is an A. So there you go, there's an A. I just literally shift up. So because chords are in a pattern and you can move those patterns up, and you're moving all the notes up in that same pattern, that same order, they just create the next chord. Don't worry too much if it doesn't all quite compute at the moment, because this is one of those things that you'll probably get half of it and the other half will make sense later as you use it and you're more accustomed to it. So we've got our G. I'll move it up one, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp. So with that one chord, the G chord, I've actually now got 12 chords I can play. I can play the chromatic scale, if you like, in chords, G, G sharp, A. So I know loads more chords. I don't just know C, F, G, A minor now. I know I can add 12 extra chords from that one shape. Now, some of these chords are easier than others. For example, if I was to take a C, which is super easy on the ukulele, but to move it up, if I was to take that note up one, I'd have to move all the open notes, because it doesn't sound very nice when you play the open notes. So if I was to move that chord up, I'd have to move all the open notes up one as well, because when you're strumming the C chord, you strum those open notes. So I'd have to move them up. And the only way of doing that is barring. And you can put a capo there as well if you wanted to, but I'm going to basically look at it as if it was bar chords to start with. So if you put the first finger right across the fret and the little finger on the 4th fret, that's now a C sharp. All we've done is take C and move it 1 fret, and now we're playing C sharp. So there's C. Use my 3rd finger, use my little finger, the 4th finger, I'll bar it with the 1st finger, and now playing C sharp. Now, admittedly, C sharps, G sharps don't come along that often, but if they did and they were in a song you liked, would you go, oh, I'm not going to learn it then, or look for an easy alternative? So you'd go, well, let's find a version of this song that doesn't have those chords in, and then you do, and it doesn't sound quite right, because it's probably wrong, because it's probably meant to have those chords to make it sound like the song. So rather than trying to find an easy solution, it's better to obviously learn, especially if you want to learn that song, or don't bother learning that song. If it's above your level and you're really struggling with it, then obviously maybe leave it for another day. But if you know your chromatic scale and you know C chord, and you put your 1st finger and you bar it, and you put a little finger there and you got C sharp, there's C sharp, there's D, D sharp, E. So if you practice doing the chromatic scale, not just as notes, but with chords as well, literally just saying the chromatic order of the notes, but with the chords. So if I start on my C chord, the next one is C sharp, D, D sharp, E, with that bar, you've now learned 12 new chords with that one chord shape that's just a C chord. Admittedly, barring it, keeping it flat and getting a good sound. If you've been playing a while, you'll have the strength. If you haven't got the strength, you might need to practice it a bit. But if you master that bar chord, you've now got 12 new chords, and you're not going to be freaked out every time you see a C sharp or an odd chord, because you can use one of the shapes you've already learned. You don't have to look at a diagram, you don't have to look at hundreds of chord shapes. You can literally just, on what you've already learned, play a lot of the chords that you're seeing on those chord charts, and it'll make your life a lot easier. The chromatic scale is probably one of the first things you should learn on any instrument, so that you understand how many notes of music, the 12 notes in music, and you get used to hearing them and playing them. But quite often it's overlooked because we want to get to playing songs and then we skip this. But you know, if you're at a level now where you're in a little bit of a rut, certainly learn the chromatic scale and then adapt it to chords. Let me give you one more example of a chord. So let's just take the F chord, for example. So as you know, an F is this. So how would I make that an F sharp? Well, if I move it up, I've got all those open notes that are left behind that I need to move up as well. It's exactly the same thing. The best thing to do with that, because of the F chord, is to use the second and third finger instead of the first and second. So where the first is the second will be, where the second is the third will be. That leaves that first finger free. And if I move that along and then put the first finger behind it, I've now got an F sharp. And the beautiful thing is, although it's a little bit tricky, if you look at guitarists, when they're playing, they play these shapes and they move up and down. They're just doing this, moving up and down. It's exactly the same thing, and the ukulele is in principle based on a guitar, so it's a good thing to learn. So there's my F sharp, but I'm putting the first finger behind it. Now I'm creating the F sharp chord proper because I've got all the notes moved up, and then that would be another version of G there. In fact, if you look at that F sharp moved up on the second fret, and I was to take that finger away and then bring that down, that's actually a G. This is just a fuller shape, basically. Another way of playing it. It doesn't make much sense to play it this way because it's easier playing the other way, but that is a G. G sharp, A sharp. So chromatically going up again. So I've got my F, move it up one, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, etc. We just keep going up. And now I've learned, so if you have a song that's got an F sharp in it, if it's got a G sharp in it or a C sharp in it, you can now play it because you already know those chords. You just got to know how to shift them up. Admittedly, it's a little bit harder because it relies on you barring to get a fuller sound, but that is your next step. If you've mastered a lot of the basic open chords and you're in a little bit of a rut, that's what you should master next, is playing some of these bar chords and literally shifting up 1 or 2 frets from the normal position that you're in. That is your next phase, and by learning the chromatic scale you can do it without looking at diagrams, and that's the beautiful thing. If it's in here, it's a lot easier. You can get it quicker as well. So I think that will do for this session. Have a lie down and another cup of tea, and come back, stay in tune, come back for more, and I will do your head in with the next one again soon. And hope you've enjoyed. Let me know if there's anything that you're not quite sure about or you're struggling with, and I will try and address it for you. Take it easy. Over and out. Okay, a little footnote. I thought I would share this with you. This is one of my favourite books to read. It's called Stephen Fry's Incomplete and Utter History of Classical Music. I've had it a while, and it's a very good read because it talks about the beginning of music notation and early composers, early pioneers of music up until now. Obviously there's a lot missing because there's a lot we don't know and a lot got lost, but what we do know and what's been recorded, this is a really fun book to read and insightful and knowledgeable. So I would definitely suggest that if you are interested in know more, because I did gloss over hundreds of years of development of the musical system just to arrive at where we are today. So yeah, if you are interested in that, check that book out, and I'll see you again soon.